Right now, as we speak, there is a war going on, likely several. At this point, you'd have to actively work to stay in the dark. It's the constant, flickering pulse of every screen in your life, the unasked-for guest in every feed you scroll. You've seen the shaky, high-definition clips of drone strikes while waiting for your coffee to brew, or the scrolling tickers of casualty counts while you were just trying to check the weather. It's everywhere. It's continuous. We live in an era where conflict isn't something that happens over there once a month in a newspaper. It's a live-stream, 24-hour-a-day reality that sits right next to our photos of lunch and our work emails. This isn't rare anymore. It's the background noise of being alive in the modern world. And here's the strange thing. You aren't there. You're safe. Your physical world hasn't changed. The chair you're sitting in is still solid, the air in your room is still quiet. But if you're honest, it doesn't always feel quiet. There's a specific kind of weight that settles behind the eyes after an hour of scrolling through the front lines. It's a tension in the shoulders, a subtle irritability, a sense that the world is somehow more jagged and precarious than it was this morning. You're an observer, yet your body is reacting like a participant. We've never really been taught how to do this, how to be a perpetual witness to global trauma without any way to actually influence it. What does it do to a mind to be constantly exposed to threat signals it can't act on? We tell ourselves we're just staying informed, as if information is a neutral thing we just store in a cabinet. But information isn't neutral, it's an environment. And when that environment is defined by violence and high-stakes conflict, your mind starts to adapt to it in ways you might not even notice. This isn't a political discussion. I'm not here to tell you what to believe or how to vote. This is about your inner experience. It's about that quiet, unexplained heaviness you've been carrying lately. I want to invite you to look at that feeling with me, not to fix it or judge it, but to understand what is actually happening inside us when we watch the world break apart from a distance. Because if we don't notice the shift, we might find ourselves living in a reality we didn't consciously choose. Before we go any further, I want to say the thing that often goes unspoken in these technical conversations. Our hearts are with the people actually standing in that dust. There is no psychological study or philosophical theory that can touch the weight of a life lost or a home destroyed. And if we're being honest, war itself feels like a monumental, tragic stupidity. It's a failure of imagination on a global scale, a relic of an old, violent way of thinking that governments and leaders keep dragging into a world that should have grown out of it by now. It's a waste of potential, a waste of life, and it feels fundamentally wrong that the people who make the decisions are rarely the ones who have to live with the consequences. We're exploring the mind here, but we're doing it with the full awareness that what we're watching is a profound human failure. The human brain is a masterpiece of evolution, but it was designed for a world that was very, very small. For most of our history, news was whatever was happening within walking distance. If you heard a loud noise or saw a flash of movement, it was almost certainly something that required you to do something, to run, to hide, or to stand your ground. Your survival system was built for local, immediate threats. It was built for action. When your brain detects danger, it doesn't just think about it, it prepares the body. It dumps cortisol and adrenaline into your system, your heart rate climbs, and your focus narrows to a sharp point. This is an incredibly efficient system when there's a physical problem to solve. The energy has a place to go. You run until you're safe, or you deal with the threat, and then your system can finally complete the cycle and return to a state of rest. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end to the stress. But now we've plugged that ancient, action-oriented system into a global fire hose of information. When you watch footage of a conflict on the other side of the planet, your brain still triggers that same alarm. It sees the rubble and the fire and it says, "Danger, do something." But there is nothing to do. You are sitting on a train or lying in bed or standing in line for a sandwich. You can't run to safety because you're already safe. You can't fight the threat because the threat is thousands of miles away. This creates a psychological short circuit. The stress response activates, but it has no outlet. The adrenaline has nowhere to go. Because the threat is continuous, there's always another clip, another update, another angle. The alarm never truly turns off. Instead of a sharp spike of stress that ends in resolution, we experience a low-level, chronic hum of anxiety that never finds its off switch. We weren't built to carry the weight of every tragedy on Earth simultaneously. We weren't designed to be aware of every fire without being able to reach for a bucket of water. This mismatch leaves us in a state of unresolved threat, where our bodies are perpetually braced for a collision that never happens. It's exhausting, not because we are weak, but because we are using our biological survival hardware in a way it was never intended to be used. And when the brain is stuck in an activation loop it can't complete, it starts to look for other ways to cope. When we find ourselves in this state, activated but unable to act, we often reach for the very thing that triggered us in the first place: more information. It's a strange human irony. We feel anxious because of the news, so we check the news to see if the thing making us anxious has gone away yet. We're looking for a headline that says it's over, or it's safe now, so that our nervous systems can finally stand down. Psychologically, this is a play for control. In an uncertain world, knowing feels like a form of protection. We tell ourselves that if we understand the geopolitics, the troop movements, and the historical context, we're somehow more prepared. But there is a point where staying informed stops being a civic duty and starts being a psychological burden. It's the point where awareness becomes a weight you carry, but can't put to use. This is what researchers call learned helplessness. Normally, when we see a problem, we do something to fix it. But when the problem is a global conflict and your only interface with it is a touchscreen, your brain learns that no matter how much it stresses, no matter how much it worries, nothing changes. This doesn't just make us sad, it makes us fundamentally tired. It's a specific kind of emotional fatigue that comes from being a spectator to a tragedy you are powerless to stop. And yet, the loop persists. We've been conditioned to believe that looking away is a form of betrayal, as if our individual stress is a necessary tax we must pay to the suffering of others. We feel guilty if we aren't witnessing it. But we have to ask ourselves, is this witness actually helping, or is it just draining the very reserves we need to be present for the people right in front of us? When awareness has no outlet for agency, it just turns inward. It becomes a knot of chronic anxiety that sits in the gut, making everything else in your life, your work, your family, your quiet moments, feel slightly less real, slightly less important. We are trading our internal peace for a sense of control that doesn't actually exist. We're trying to manage the world's chaos by letting it occupy our minds, hoping that if we just watch closely enough, we'll eventually find the exit. But the more we look, the more we realize that information without action isn't a map. It's just a mirror of the fire. There is a quiet, almost invisible transformation that happens when you've been looking at the fire for too long. It moves from being something you see to being the thing you see with. It's like putting on a pair of tinted glasses. At first, you're very aware that the world looks different, but after an hour, your brain compensates. You forget you're wearing them. The tint just becomes the way things are. This is where the psychology of perception gets a little unsettling. We like to think our eyes are like windows, letting in an objective reality. But in truth, your brain is more like a prediction engine. It's constantly guessing what the world is based on the data it's been fed lately. If your digital diet is composed of 80% conflict, 10% crisis, and 10% ads for survival gear, your brain starts to build a prediction model of a world that is fundamentally hostile. This is what happens when fear becomes a lens. You walk down a perfectly peaceful street in your own neighborhood, but because your internal map is currently calibrated to a war zone, your brain is on a high arousal lookout. A car backfiring isn't just a car backfiring, it's a heartbeat of genuine panic. A group of people standing on a corner doesn't look like a community, it looks like a potential flashpoint. You're scanning for threats that aren't there because your brain has been convinced that danger is the only thing worth noticing. It's a strange philosophical crossroads. Is the world actually becoming more dangerous, or is it just that our ability to see anything else is being eroded? When we are hyper-focused on the most extreme versions of reality, the quiet, mundane, and peaceful parts of life start to feel like illusions. They feel fake or naive compared to the real violence on the screen. But peace is just as real as conflict. The sandwich you're eating is real. The person sitting across from you is real. When we let a constant stream of threat shape our expectations, we aren't just staying informed, we are allowing our perception of reality to be hijacked. We lose the ability to distinguish between a global crisis and our local reality. We begin to live in a fear-filtered version of existence, where every interaction is a potential conflict and every silence is just a prelude to a scream. The question we have to ask is, if we lose the ability to see a world that isn't on fire, how will we ever have the clarity to put the flames out? It's one thing to feel a temporary spike in stress after a bad headline, but it's another thing entirely when that stress starts to live in your bones. We often talk about the news as if it's something we pick up and put down, but the truth is that repeated exposure to conflict doesn't just change your mood for an hour, it slowly starts to reshape who you are. Your emotional baseline, that quiet home your mind returns to when nothing is happening, begins to shift. It drifts away from a sense of basic safety and moves toward a state of perpetual defense. You might notice this in the small, seemingly unrelated parts of your day. You find yourself getting more reactive over things that used to be trivial. A slow driver, a misplaced set of keys, or a misunderstood text message starts to trigger a level of irritation that feels out of proportion. That's because your internal threat meter has been calibrated so high by the constant stream of global conflict that you've lost your middle ground. You're either on or you're numb. There is very little space left for simple, calm presence. This is how an identity shift happens, without us ever giving it permission. You start to become a person who expects the world to be hostile. Your trust in strangers, in institutions, and even in the future itself starts to erode. You might even start to pride yourself on this cynicism, calling it realism, as if being perpetually braced for tragedy makes you more intelligent or more aware. But there's a steep price for that kind of awareness. When you stop believing in the possibility of safety, you stop being able to inhabit your own life. The inner safety that used to allow you to be creative or playful or deeply connected to the people around you is replaced by a vigilant, watchful ego. You aren't just a person watching a war anymore. You've become someone who carries the logic of war into every room you enter. You look for the us and the them, the threat and the defense, the win and the loss. It's a quiet, internal occupation of the self. And the most unsettling part is that we often don't realize we've changed until we try to remember who we were before the feed became constant. We have to ask, if we are becoming people who only know how to react to fire, who will be left to remember what it's like to just be? Now, it's important we don't get lost in the psychology and forget the ground beneath our feet. Because the truth is, these are war times. This isn't a drill, and it isn't an overactive imagination. There are actual borders being redrawn, actual families being displaced, and real objective uncertainty about what the world will look like a year from now. If you feel uneasy, it's partly because the world is uneasy, but there is a vital distinction we have to make, and it's one our modern technology is designed to blur. There is a difference between the reality of global conflict and the constant, high-definition immersion in its most extreme, agonizing signals. One is an objective fact of our era, the other is a psychological choice we make every time we unlock our phones. Acknowledging the impact of this content isn't about denial. It's not about putting on noise-canceling headphones while the building is on fire. It's about understanding that you cannot help put out a fire if you are standing so close to the flames that you're choking on the smoke. If your inner stability is completely demolished by the stream of information you're consuming, you haven't become more aware. You've just become another casualty of the conflict's psychological footprint. So, what is the right relationship between a person and a world in pain? We're taught that total immersion is the only way to care, but that's a trap. Real awareness requires a certain amount of distance, not the distance of indifference, but the distance of clarity. It's the difference between a doctor who feels for their patient and a doctor who starts bleeding because their patient is bleeding. One can help, the other just adds to the trauma. We have to ask ourselves how much of this awareness is actually serving the world and how much is just a form of self-inflicted wounding. If staying informed means losing the ability to be a calm, stable presence for the people in your own life, then who are you really helping? Living in war times doesn't mean you have to turn your mind into a battlefield. It means you have to work twice as hard to protect the peace that remains, so that when the world is ready to heal, there is actually someone left who remembers how to do it. The first step isn't to delete your apps or move to a cabin in the woods, though some days that probably sounds like a pretty good idea. It's something much closer and, in a way, much more powerful. It's about creating a sliver of space between the image on the screen and the person holding the phone. It's the difference between being the storm and being the person standing by a window watching it pass. This is a move toward what we call meta-awareness. It's a big word for a very simple human act: watching the watcher. The next time a notification pops up and you feel that familiar spike of adrenaline, try to catch it while it's still in midair. Don't push it away. Don't judge yourself for feeling it. Just notice it. Say to yourself, okay, my heart is racing, my jaw is tight, I'm reacting to a signal. The moment you name the feeling, you've stopped being the feeling. You've moved from the driver's seat to the passenger seat. You're still in the car and you're still seeing the road, but you aren't the one white-knuckling the steering wheel anymore. This small gap is where your freedom lives. When you can observe your own internal response without becoming it, the war content stops being a script for your identity and starts being what it actually is: information. Sad, difficult, complicated information, but it no longer has the power to tell you who you are or how you should feel about your neighbor. You're learning to witness without being consumed. It's a quiet form of rebellion against a system that wants you to be perpetually reactive. And the beautiful thing is that this space doesn't make you less compassionate. It actually makes you more so. Because when you aren't drowning in your own stress response, you have the emotional bandwidth to actually care. You have the clarity to look at the world's pain and say, I see this, without losing the ground beneath your own feet. You aren't avoiding the reality of the times we live in. You're just refusing to let those times dictate the architecture of your soul. You're finding the stillness that exists even in the middle of the noise. We started this journey looking at a screen, thinking about a conflict thousands of miles away. We thought we were just observers, witnesses to a history that didn't physically belong to us. But if you've stayed with me this far, maybe you've realized that there is no such thing as a distant war anymore. Every image we consume, every headline we digest is a movement happening inside our own awareness. The real shift isn't about changing what's on the screen, it's about changing how we relate to the person holding it. The tension in your chest, the way your mind narrows, the subtle, creeping fear of the world, these aren't just reactions to the news, they are the internal front lines where our perception of reality is being reshaped every single day. When you put your phone down after this, the world will still be loud, the headlines won't stop. But maybe, for a brief moment, you can just notice the stillness of the room around you. Notice the weight of your own body in the chair. Notice that even in a world that feels like it's on fire, there is a part of you that remains untouched. A silent, steady witness that is simply aware of the smoke. If we can find that space, we haven't ignored the world. We've finally found a place to stand so we can actually see it for what it is. Because the most important thing happening right now might not be the conflict on the screen, but the quiet realization happening in the mind that is watching it. What else have we been absorbing that was never meant to be ours?